There are winters that settle quietly upon the earth like a white prayer, and there are winters that arrive as judgment. The winter of 1867 belonged to the latter. Across the English countryside, winds prowled over barren moors and through skeletal forests, rattling shutters and carrying whispers from village to village. It was a season that seemed intent on exposing every weakness, every secret, every sorrow that polite society preferred hidden beneath velvet curtains. And there was no secret more eagerly discussed than Miss Eleanor Ashcombe. Her name drifted through drawing rooms and market squares alike, spoken with lowered voices and sharpened curiosity. Once she had been welcomed wherever she went. The daughter of a respected gentleman, she had possessed that rare quality which could not be purchased by fortune alone, grace. Yet grace was a fragile shield against scandal. Now, when her name was uttered, it was followed by silence or pity, sometimes by laughter, most often by condemnation. The sight of her walking through the village was enough to draw curtains aside. Women exchanged glances over teacups. Men removed their hats with reluctant politeness. Children, too young to understand cruelty yet old enough to imitate it, stared openly at the swell beneath her worn coat. She carried a child, and no husband stood beside her. Society required no further evidence. The truth, whatever it might have been, mattered little beside appearances. As dusk settled over the village on a particularly bitter evening, Eleanor passed beneath rows of dim gas lamps. Snowflakes drifted through the amber glow, settling upon her dark bonnet and threadbare cloak. Her steps were slow, not from weakness alone but from exhaustion of a deeper kind. She had grown weary of defending herself, weary of explaining, weary of hoping. Only months earlier, the death of her father had stripped away the final protections surrounding her life. Grief itself would have been burden enough, yet misfortune rarely traveled alone. Her uncle, a man whose smile never reached his eyes, had swiftly assumed control of the family estate. Within weeks, Eleanor discovered how little sentiment existed within legal documents. Rooms that had once echoed with laughter became inaccessible. Servants who had watched her grow from childhood suddenly avoided her gaze. Then came the final humiliation. She was informed that alternative arrangements had been made. The house where she had been born no longer belonged to her. Neither, it seemed, did her future. Since that day, she had occupied a modest cottage on the edge of the village, surviving upon dwindling savings and stubborn pride. Pride was, perhaps, the last possession society had failed to confiscate. The wind strengthened. Snow whipped across the road in restless sheets. Eleanor pressed one gloved hand against her stomach. A faint movement answered beneath her ribs. For a fleeting moment, her expression softened. "You must forgive me," she whispered into the storm. The words vanished immediately into the darkness. Yet speaking them eased something inside her. There were nights when fear wrapped itself around her heart so tightly she struggled to breathe. Fear for the child. Fear of poverty. Fear of a future shaped entirely by judgment. Still she endured. Not because she possessed extraordinary courage, but because someone depended upon her. Beneath her cloak, hidden close to her chest, rested two treasures she guarded with almost sacred devotion. The first was an antique signet ring suspended from a narrow ribbon. The second was a letter. Its paper had yellowed with age. Its folds had softened from countless readings. She had written it years ago. Never sent it. Never destroyed it. Some wounds occupied a strange territory between memory and prayer. The storm deepened. Snow accumulated rapidly along stone walls and hedgerows. The road ahead dissolved into a blur of white and shadow. Eleanor knew she should return to the cottage. Yet returning meant confronting another cold evening alone. Another night listening to the wind. Another night wondering whether the man she had loved still existed somewhere beneath the same indifferent sky. She lowered her gaze. The ring pressed gently against her heart. A memory stirred. Warm sunlight. Laughter. A voice she had not heard in years. The recollection hurt enough to steal her breath. She continued walking. Minutes passed. Or perhaps hours. The distinction became difficult to measure. The cold found every weakness. It slipped beneath fabric and settled into bone. Her legs grew heavy. Her vision blurred around the edges. The storm transformed the world into something dreamlike and distant. At last her strength failed. She stumbled, recovered, took several more uncertain steps, then stumbled again. This time there was no recovery. She collapsed beside the road, sinking into untouched snow. For a moment she attempted to rise. Her hands trembled violently. The effort proved impossible. Above her, the heavens stretched vast and merciless. Snowflakes landed upon her lashes. She thought briefly of her father, then of the child, then of a face she had spent years trying unsuccessfully to forget. Darkness approached with surprising gentleness. Far away through the howl of the wind came another sound. Horse hooves. Wheels. A carriage. The vehicle emerged from the storm like an apparition, lanterns glowing through swirling white. It slowed abruptly as the driver spotted the fallen figure beside the road. The door opened. A tall gentleman descended into the snow. Even through fading consciousness, Eleanor sensed authority in his bearing. He knelt beside her. One gloved hand touched her wrist. "Good God," he murmured. The voice seemed familiar, painfully familiar. Yet before she could grasp the reason, darkness swept over her entirely. The stranger lifted her carefully into his arms and carried her toward the waiting carriage. As he did, the lantern light revealed a face known throughout England. Duke Sebastian Hawthorne, one of the realm's most powerful noblemen. He glanced once at the unconscious woman, noting the dignity that hardship had failed to erase. "No soul shall perish while I possess both roof and fire," he said quietly. The carriage disappeared into the storm. Hours later, within the warmth of Hawthorne Manor, servants removed Eleanor's frozen cloak. As the fabric loosened, something slipped free and struck the polished floor with a small metallic sound. The Duke looked down absent-mindedly. Then he froze. Resting beside the hearth lay an antique signet ring. Color drained from his face. He knew that ring. Somehow, impossibly, he knew it. The ring remained upon the Duke's desk long after the household had retired for the night. Outside, the storm continued its relentless assault upon Hawthorne Manor. Snow struck the tall windows in restless gusts, while ancient oaks groaned beneath the weight of winter. Yet Duke Sebastian Hawthorne scarcely noticed the weather. His attention remained fixed upon the small object gleaming beneath the amber glow of a single lamp. Time had altered many things. It had transformed a spirited young gentleman into one of England's most powerful noblemen. It had buried hopes, silenced dreams, erected walls around old wounds. Yet it had not altered the ring. He recognized every detail. The carved crest, the delicate imperfections along its edge, the faint scratch created years ago during an afternoon he had once believed insignificant. His hand tightened around the arm of his chair. Impossible. The word echoed through his thoughts. And yet the evidence rested before him. Across the manor, Eleanor Ashcombe slept within a guest chamber warmed by a crackling fire. Color had gradually returned to her cheeks. The physician expressed cautious optimism. Rest, nourishment, and shelter would restore her strength. Still, sleep brought little peace. Fragments of memory drifted through her dreams. Snow became sunlight. The howl of winter became distant laughter. A familiar voice called her name from somewhere she could not reach. She stirred uneasily beneath the blankets. Downstairs, Sebastian rose from his chair and crossed to the window. For years he had disciplined himself against sentiment. A duke possessed obligations greater than personal longing. At least that was what he had repeatedly told himself. Yet tonight old memories prowled through his mind with unsettling persistence. A young woman standing beside a garden wall. Dark eyes bright with intelligence. A smile capable of turning ordinary moments into treasured ones. The recollections arrived uninvited and refused dismissal. At dawn he finally retired. Sleep lasted scarcely an hour. Responsibility summoned him. Estate matters required attention. Tenants awaited decisions. Correspondence demanded replies. Life, indifferent to emotional turmoil, continued its steady march. Yet throughout the morning he found himself glancing toward the guest wing. By afternoon, curiosity overcame restraint. The physician met him outside Eleanor's chamber. "She has awakened, Your Grace." Sebastian nodded. "How does she fare?" "Weak, certainly. Exhausted beyond measure. But stronger than she appears." The physician paused. "There is remarkable determination in her." Sebastian's gaze shifted toward the closed door. "Yes," he said quietly. "I believe there is." When he entered, Eleanor sat beside the window wrapped in a pale shawl. Snow-covered gardens stretched beyond the glass. Winter sunlight illuminated her features with a soft radiance that hardship had failed to erase. For a brief moment neither spoke. Recognition did not come. Years had altered them both. The distance between youth and maturity concealed old truths. At last Eleanor inclined her head. "You have my gratitude, Your Grace." Her voice remained gentle despite fatigue. "You owe me none," Sebastian replied. "You saved my life." "No. I merely arrived before it was too late." Something within his tone caused her gaze to linger. The sensation unsettled her. There was familiarity there. Not certainty. Only an echo. A feeling she could not explain. Days passed. The storm subsided. Winter sunlight returned. Eleanor recovered steadily beneath the care of the household. Yet Hawthorne Manor was not isolated from the world. Servants carried stories. Visitors carried assumptions. Whispers traveled faster than carriages. Soon neighboring estates learned that an unmarried pregnant woman resided beneath the Duke's roof. Speculation flourished immediately. Some called the arrangement reckless. Others considered it scandalous. A few suggested motives far less charitable. Sebastian ignored every rumor, at least publicly. Privately, however, he became increasingly aware of Eleanor's presence. Not because she demanded attention. Quite the opposite. She moved through the manor with quiet dignity. She never presumed upon hospitality. Never sought sympathy. Never complained. Even sorrow seemed something she carried discreetly. One morning he encountered her standing alone beside a frost-covered conservatory. Its glass panes shimmered beneath winter sunlight. Inside, dormant plants awaited spring. Eleanor regarded the structure with unmistakable longing. "The roses once bloomed there year-round," she said softly. Sebastian followed her gaze. "My mother adored them. They must have been beautiful." She believed beauty deserved preservation. A faint smile touched Eleanor's lips. She was wise. Nothing more passed between them. Yet the image remained with him throughout the day. The following morning, servants reopened the conservatory. Gardeners worked tirelessly through the night. Coal fires warmed the interior. Rare winter roses were transported from protected glasshouses across the estate. When Eleanor entered later that afternoon, fragrant blossoms greeted her from every direction. Cream, crimson, soft pink. Life flourishing amidst winter. She stood speechless. Footsteps sounded behind her. Sebastian remained near the entrance. "You restored it," she whispered. The room seemed lonely. Her eyes glistened unexpectedly. "No one has shown me such kindness in a very long time." The honesty of the statement struck him with surprising force. For an instant neither looked away. Something fragile passed between them. Something dangerous. Something neither fully understood. Meanwhile, society sharpened its knives. The opportunity for public humiliation arrived during a charitable winter gathering hosted by a neighboring countess. Attendance was expected. Absence would attract notice. Eleanor wished to decline. Sebastian insisted. "You have done nothing requiring concealment." The gathering occupied a magnificent ballroom illuminated by crystal chandeliers and hundreds of candles. Music drifted through the air. Silk gowns shimmered like moving jewels. Yet beneath elegance lurked cruelty. Whispers followed Eleanor from the moment she entered. Eyes lingered upon her condition. Conversations paused. Judgments multiplied. At first she endured in silence. Then a prominent noblewoman approached. Lady Beatrice Langley possessed wealth, influence, and a talent for public cruelty disguised as concern. "My dear Miss Ashcombe," she announced loudly, ensuring nearby guests could hear, "it is comforting to know some ladies require neither husband nor reputation to secure residence in a duke's household." Laughter flickered through portions of the crowd. Heat rushed into Eleanor's face. Humiliation tightened around her chest. Years of judgment seemed to converge upon that single moment. Lady Beatrice smiled. "Tell us, my dear, does the child's father intend eventually to reveal himself?" The ballroom fell silent. Every eye turned toward Eleanor. Before she could answer, another voice interrupted. Come. Measured. Unmistakably commanding. "Any insult directed toward Miss Ashcombe shall be regarded as directed toward me." Sebastian had crossed the room. His expression remained composed. His eyes did not. A dangerous stillness settled over the gathering. Lady Beatrice paled visibly. The Duke offered no further explanation. None was required. He simply extended his arm toward Eleanor. After a moment's hesitation, she accepted it. Together they left the ballroom. The silence behind them proved louder than any scandal. That night, back at Hawthorne Manor, Eleanor sat alone beside her bedroom fire. Tears slipped quietly down her cheeks. Not because society had wounded her again. That pain was familiar. It was the Duke's voice that haunted her thoughts. The way he had defended her. The way certain words stirred memories she had buried years ago. Downstairs, unable to sleep, Sebastian finally unfolded the faded letter discovered among her belongings. His eyes moved across the first lines. Then lower. Then to the signature at the bottom. The blood drained from his face. Written in Eleanor's hand were words addressed to him alone. Sebastian remained motionless long after finishing the letter. The fire crackled softly within the library hearth, casting shifting gold across shelves lined with centuries of history. Outside, winter pressed against the manor windows, but inside another season had awakened entirely. It was a season of remembered gardens, stolen afternoons, and promises spoken beneath summer skies. The letter trembled slightly in his hand. Not from age. From the force of memories returning all at once. He recognized every curve of Eleanor's handwriting, every careful stroke of ink. The letter had been written years earlier, during the period when silence had descended between them like an unexpected grave. "My dear Sebastian," it began. His eyes closed briefly. No one had called him that in such a way for a very long time. The years fell away. Before the title. Before the responsibilities. Before duty had hardened into habit. He had simply been Sebastian Hawthorne then, younger son of a powerful family, carrying dreams larger than caution and affections deeper than wisdom. And Eleanor had been the center of them all. The letter told a heartbreaking story. She had waited. Written repeatedly. Received no reply. Each unanswered message had wounded her confidence further. Eventually she had concluded the obvious. He no longer loved her. The final lines nearly shattered him. "I shall trouble you no more. Whatever happiness awaits you, may it be greater than the happiness I once imagined for myself." Sebastian lowered the pages. A bitter realization settled upon him. He had never received those letters. Not one. Nor had Eleanor received his. Someone had severed the bridge between them while both stood helpless on opposite shores. For years he had believed himself abandoned. For years she had suffered the same belief. The tragedy was almost unbearable in its simplicity. The following morning arrived beneath pale winter sunlight. Eleanor descended cautiously to breakfast, still regaining strength. She expected another quiet day among strangers. Instead she discovered the Duke waiting beside the drawing-room fire. He rose immediately. His expression carried an unfamiliar gravity. "Miss Ashcombe." "Your Grace." For a moment silence lingered. Then he gestured toward a chair. "Would you permit me a conversation?" Something in his tone made refusal impossible. She sat. The firelight danced between them. Neither seemed entirely comfortable. Neither seemed willing to leave. At length Sebastian spoke. "Have you ever reflected upon how easily lives may be altered by a single falsehood?" Eleanor studied him carefully. "Often." "And do you believe happiness survives such alteration?" A faint sadness touched her features. "I believe happiness survives many things." The answer affected him more than she realized. Because despite everything she had endured, she still believed survival possible. The discussion drifted elsewhere. Books, music, travel. Ordinary subjects. Yet beneath every word flowed a growing undercurrent of familiarity. The sensation troubled Eleanor. The Duke's expressions. His mannerisms. The cadence of certain phrases. All seemed strangely known. Like fragments of a forgotten melody. Days passed in a delicate pattern. Winter walks through snow-covered gardens. Conversations beside library fires. Quiet companionship during evening meals. Neither intentionally sought the other. Yet they repeatedly found themselves together. The distance between strangers narrowed. Something warmer emerged. One afternoon Sebastian discovered Eleanor standing before a locked door in a deserted wing of the manor. Dust coated the brass handle. Curiosity flickered in her eyes. "What room is this?" He paused. "A music room. You no longer use it?" "Not for years." She nodded. Yet disappointment crossed her face before she could conceal it. "Do you play?" he asked. "A little." The modest answer carried unmistakable affection. Music mattered to her. That evening Sebastian ordered the room restored. Servants cleaned throughout the night. Candles were replaced. The grand piano polished. Fresh flowers arranged. By morning the neglected chamber breathed again. When Eleanor entered later that day, she stopped in astonishment. Sunlight streamed through tall windows. Ivory keys gleamed. The room seemed transformed from memory itself. Upon the piano rested a single handwritten note. "Some joys deserve resurrection." She knew instantly who had written it. Emotion tightened her throat. Slowly she crossed the room and touched the keys. The first notes emerged tentatively. Then stronger. Music filled the manor. Melancholy. Beautiful. Alive. Down the corridor, Sebastian listened unseen. The melody pierced directly through years of carefully maintained restraint. Because he remembered. Long ago, Eleanor had played that same piece while laughing at his inability to recognize composers. The memory arrived so vividly that for a moment he could almost see her younger self standing before him. When the final note faded, he entered quietly. Eleanor turned. Neither spoke immediately. Words seemed insufficient. "You remembered," she said at last. The statement was simple, yet it carried layers neither fully understood. Sebastian held her gaze. Yes. The single word lingered between them. That evening snow fell gently beyond the manor windows. The world appeared hushed, suspended between past and future. Eleanor sat beside the fire in the music room while Sebastian remained nearby. Conversation drifted naturally into memory. Not specific memories. Not yet. Only reflections. Regrets. Lost opportunities. The subjects people discuss when trust begins replacing caution. At last Eleanor spoke, the question haunting her thoughts. "Your Grace, have you ever loved someone beyond reason?" The inquiry surprised them both. Firelight flickered across Sebastian's face. "Yes." The answer came immediately. "And did you lose her?" A shadow crossed his expression. "I believed I did." Eleanor looked into the flames. "So did I." Silence followed. Not uncomfortable. Merely honest. The room seemed smaller somehow. The distance between them shorter. Years of loneliness hovered just beyond reach. Finally Sebastian turned toward her fully. "There are truths I should have discovered long ago." His voice had become remarkably gentle. "What truths?" "That absence does not always mean abandonment." The words struck Eleanor with inexplicable force. Her heart quickened. A strange certainty began stirring inside her. Not complete understanding. Only the first glimmer of it. Like dawn emerging through fog. Several days later, that certainty became impossible to ignore. The moment arrived unexpectedly. No audience. No grandeur. Only honesty. Eleanor had asked to speak with him privately. They met in the library. Winter sunlight filtered through tall windows. Dust motes drifted lazily through the air. She seemed nervous, determined, afraid. Sebastian sensed immediately that something important was coming. At length she withdrew a small bundle of documents from her reticule. Her fingers trembled slightly. "There is something you must know." He waited. "The child I carry is not illegitimate." The declaration stunned him. Eleanor drew a careful breath. "We were married." The room seemed to still around them. Years of assumptions shattered instantly. "We married in secret," she continued softly. "Before he departed. Before the letters ceased. Before everything fell apart." Sebastian felt the ground shift beneath certainty itself. Every instinct urged him toward a truth he scarcely dared consider. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "I believed him dead," she whispered. "Just as I believed he abandoned me." A terrible understanding began unfolding within him. Slowly. Relentlessly. Like a locked door opening after years of darkness. Then she spoke the name. Not the title. Not the Duke. The man. His name was Sebastian Hawthorne. For several heartbeats neither moved. The silence felt enormous. Eleanor watched disbelief spread across his face. Sebastian stared at her as though seeing both the woman before him and the years they had lost. When he finally found his voice, it emerged scarcely above a whisper. "All these years, Eleanor, I mourned a ghost while my heart still lived." Tears slipped down her cheeks. Between them lay the documents proving everything. Yet neither noticed the servant lingering briefly beyond the half-open library door. Nor did they see the figure quietly retreat into the corridor after glimpsing the marriage certificate that could change everything. Morning arrived with neither peace nor certainty at Hawthorne Manor. The revelation shared within the library had transformed everything. Eleanor was not merely the woman Sebastian once loved. She was his lawful wife, hidden from him by years of deception. Yet the marriage certificate, the single document capable of silencing every accusation, had vanished before sunset. Servants searched desks, cabinets, and corridors. Footmen questioned one another. Housemaids retraced every movement. Still the paper remained missing. Hope had returned at last, only to find itself threatened again by unseen hands and deliberate malice lurking nearby still. Beneath renewed joy waited danger. Sebastian refused to surrender to despair. He reviewed every detail surrounding their separation, treating memory like evidence. Letters had disappeared. Messages had been intercepted. Meetings had somehow failed. The pattern suggested design rather than chance. As pieces aligned, one figure emerged repeatedly from the shadows of recollection. His aunt, Lady Augusta Hawthorne. Elegant before society, she had always prized ambition above affection. Years earlier she had opposed any attachment between Sebastian and a gentleman's daughter lacking great fortune. Now old conversations acquired darker meanings. The possibility sickened him. If Augusta had stolen happiness once, she might be stealing justice again. Eleanor meanwhile struggled with emotions equally turbulent. The truth had reunited her with the man she never stopped loving, yet uncertainty shadowed every heartbeat. Without proof, society would continue branding her a fallen woman and her child a scandal. She sat beside the conservatory roses, watching winter sunlight touch crimson petals, and wondered how quickly dignity could be restored after years of public humiliation. Sebastian found her there. Rather than offer promises he could not yet fulfill, he took her hand. The gesture was simple, respectful, and unwavering. For the first time she felt entirely believed and completely safe at last. Their search uncovered answers faster than either expected. A frightened maid eventually confessed seeing a trusted household steward leave the library shortly after Eleanor revealed the certificate. Confronted privately, the man broke almost immediately. He admitted accepting payment to remove the document and deliver it elsewhere. The confession exposed a conspiracy extending beyond Hawthorne Manor. Lady Augusta had orchestrated the theft. More troubling still, she possessed several forged letters created years before, letters designed to convince both lovers they had been abandoned. The cruelty was breathtaking. Lives had been redirected not by fate but by calculated interference, greed, alone indeed. Sebastian traveled that evening to his aunt's London residence. Rain lashed the carriage windows throughout the journey, turning streets into rivers of reflected lamplight. He entered without ceremony. Lady Augusta received him in a gilded drawing room, her composure immaculate. For several moments neither acknowledged the true purpose of the visit. Then Sebastian placed the steward's written confession upon a table between them. Silence followed. It revealed more than words. Augusta's expression scarcely changed, yet the absence of surprise condemned her. She defended her choices as necessary sacrifices for family prestige. Sebastian heard only the wreckage beneath them all there. When he demanded the certificate, Augusta resisted until she recognized something unfamiliar in her nephew. The young man she once manipulated through duty had vanished. In his place stood a husband who finally understood what had been stolen from him. Her arguments weakened. Her certainty faltered. At last she surrendered a locked dispatch box. Inside rested the missing certificate alongside bundles of intercepted correspondence. Eleanor's letters. Sebastian's letters. Entire years of love imprisoned within ribbon and dust. Holding them felt almost unbearable. He left immediately, carrying proof, grief, vindication, and a growing determination to repair whatever remained reparable thereafter now. News of the coming confrontation spread rapidly through fashionable circles. A grand winter ball at Blackwell House provided the perfect stage. Attendance would include influential peers, political figures, and many who had eagerly participated in Eleanor's disgrace. Invitations arrived despite the controversy because society adored spectacle. On the appointed evening, chandeliers blazed above polished marble floors. Musicians filled the air with waltzes. Diamonds flashed beneath candlelight. Conversations flowed like champagne. Yet anticipation hovered over everything. Guests sensed an event approaching, though few understood its nature. Rumor had summoned them. Truth was about to arrive before everyone assembled there at last. Eleanor stood before a mirror at Hawthorne Manor while maids adjusted the final details of her gown. The woman reflected there scarcely resembled the exhausted figure rescued from snow weeks earlier. Confidence had not fully returned, but neither had it abandoned her. When Sebastian entered, dressed in formal black, emotion briefly eclipsed words. He crossed the room and offered his arm. She accepted. During the carriage ride neither spoke much. They did not require conversation. The future waited beyond those ballroom doors. Whatever happened inside they would face it together. That certainty changed everything between them forever and always now. The music faltered when they entered. Hundreds of eyes turned simultaneously. Whispered judgments traveled across the room before dying altogether. Sebastian guided Eleanor forward with calm assurance. Several aristocrats attempted polite greetings, uncertain where loyalties should rest. Then Lady Beatrice, whose mockery had once humiliated Eleanor publicly, appeared among the crowd. Before she could speak, Sebastian addressed the gathering. His voice carried effortlessly through the silence. He presented the recovered certificate. He revealed the intercepted letters. Witnesses confirmed the secret marriage. Finally he delivered words destined to outlive every scandal. Tonight I protect my wife before all to witness history. Shock swept through the ballroom like sudden wind across water. Faces that once displayed contempt now reflected embarrassment and awe. Eleanor felt years of shame lifting piece by piece. She was not an intruder. Not a burden. Not a cautionary tale. She had always been the Duchess of Hawthorne, though neither title nor recognition had protected her from suffering. As congratulations cautiously began, relief overwhelmed her exhausted body. The room blurred. Sebastian caught her before she could fall. Fear instantly replaced triumph. A physician rushed forward. Eleanor pressed a trembling hand against her stomach. The child was coming early. The journey back to Hawthorne Manor unfolded beneath a sky that seemed determined to repeat the past. Snow descended in thick, relentless curtains, swallowing roads, hedgerows, and distant hills beneath an endless field of white. The same season that had nearly claimed Eleanor's life now surrounded the carriage once more, but everything had changed. Weeks earlier she had traveled through winter alone, abandoned by society and burdened by despair. Now she was accompanied by the man who belonged beside her. Yet love, having finally triumphed over deception, faced a new adversary. Tom. Inside the carriage, Eleanor fought to conceal her pain. Each contraction tightened around her with increasing force. Sebastian remained beside her, one hand clasping hers, his composure maintained only through extraordinary effort. "Look at me, Eleanor." She lifted her gaze. "You crossed years of sorrow and survived them." His voice remained steady despite the fear in his eyes. "You shall survive this as well." A faint smile appeared through her discomfort. "That sounds remarkably like an order, Your Grace." "It is." The answer drew the smallest laugh from her. Even then he sought ways to ease her fear. The sight nearly broke his heart. When the manor finally emerged through the storm, every available servant rushed into action. Doctors were summoned. Fires were stoked throughout the house. Lamps illuminated corridors from cellar to attic. The grand estate transformed into something entirely different from the seat of a noble family. It became a place of waiting, a place of prayer, a place of hope. Hours passed. The storm intensified. Wind battered ancient stone walls while snow accumulated against every window. Within an upstairs chamber, Eleanor endured labor surrounded by physicians and attendants. Outside that chamber, Sebastian discovered the limits of power. Throughout his life, influence had solved problems. Money had opened doors. Status had commanded obedience. Yet none of those things could help him now. He could neither lessen Eleanor's suffering nor guarantee her safety. He could only wait. And waiting proved unbearable. The Duke, who had faced political rivals, financial crises, and public scandal without hesitation, now paced endless circuits across the corridor. Every muffled sound from behind the door tightened anxiety around his chest. Every passing minute felt like an hour. At one point, the family physician emerged briefly. Sebastian moved toward him immediately. "Tell me the truth." The physician hesitated. "The labor is difficult." A terrible silence followed. "But not hopeless." Not hopeless. The phrase became Sebastian's lifeline. After the physician departed, he entered the library seeking distraction and found none. The room carried traces of everything they had recovered. Letters, memories, fragments of a stolen life. Drawn by instinct, he unlocked a small cabinet hidden behind shelves. Inside rested a collection few people knew existed. For years he had preserved them in secret. Not because he expected reunion, because he had never learned how to let them go. A pressed wildflower. A faded ribbon. Several sketches. A book containing a handwritten inscription. Tokens from another life. Tokens from Eleanor. One by one he removed them. Each object represented a memory. Each memory represented a wound. And yet tonight those wounds felt strangely precious. Because they proved something essential. He had never stopped loving her. Not truly. Near midnight, a housemaid entered quietly. "Your Grace." He looked up. Her Grace requested these. The maid's eyes settled upon the keepsakes. Sebastian hesitated, then nodded. "Take them." Minutes later the small collection arrived in Eleanor's chamber. She examined each item through exhaustion and disbelief. The pressed flower she had given him beside a riverbank. The ribbon from her bonnet after a summer picnic. The inscription she had once written inside a favorite novel. Tears filled her eyes. Not because the objects possessed value. Because they revealed devotion. Years had separated them. Silence had imprisoned them. Yet he had preserved every memory. Every fragment. Every reminder. One elderly nurse observed quietly. "That man loves you very much, Your Grace." Eleanor smiled through tears. Yes. For the first time in years she could answer without uncertainty. The hours crept onward. The storm raged. The manor waited. And somewhere between midnight and dawn, the situation worsened. The physician returned to Sebastian once more. This time his expression carried greater concern. "We must proceed carefully." Fear sharpened instantly. "Is she in danger?" The physician chose his words with care. "Both mother and child are exhausted." The answer was enough. Sebastian closed his eyes briefly. For years he had believed fate cruel. Now he wondered whether fate intended to test him one final time. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "Save them both. We shall do everything possible." The physician returned upstairs. Sebastian remained alone. The storm howled outside. Firelight flickered across dark wood panels. For the first time since boyhood he knelt. Not before a king. Not before society. Before God. He prayed without eloquence. Without formality. Simply as a man desperate not to lose the woman he loved. Dawn approached slowly. Gray light began filtering through snow-covered windows. The manor remained silent. Too silent. Then suddenly footsteps echoed through the corridor. The physician emerged. Sebastian rose immediately. The older man's face revealed nothing. For one terrible heartbeat, the Duke feared the worst. Then the physician smiled. Relief nearly brought Sebastian to his knees. "You have a son." The words transformed the world. Everything seemed to stop, then start again. Brighter, warmer, larger. "And Eleanor?" "She is asking for you." Sebastian did not remember crossing the corridor. Only the door opening. Only the sight awaiting him. Morning light filled the chamber with silver radiance. Snow drifted gently beyond tall windows. The storm had finally exhausted itself. Within the bed rested Eleanor, pale but smiling. In her arms lay a newborn child wrapped carefully in blankets. For a long moment Sebastian simply stood there, overcome. The image before him represented everything he had once believed lost forever. Love, family, future, home. At last he approached. Slowly, reverently. He knelt beside the bed. His gaze moved from Eleanor to the infant and back again. Neither husband nor wife attempted to hide their tears. There seemed little point. They had earned them. Carefully, Eleanor placed the child into his arms. The tiny boy opened his eyes briefly. Sebastian stared down at him with wonder. "So small," he murmured, "and already responsible for terrifying his father." A laugh escaped Eleanor. The sound filled the room with warmth. For a few moments they simply existed together. No titles. No scandals. No expectations. Only a family. Finally Sebastian returned the child to Eleanor and reached for her hand. She intertwined her fingers with his. Outside, sunlight began breaking through the clouds. Golden rays spread across fresh snow. The world seemed transformed. "The world spent years convincing us we belonged apart," Sebastian said softly. His eyes never left hers. "Yet every road, every winter, every sorrow led you back to me." Emotion shimmered in Eleanor's gaze. "And to you." Silence followed. Not empty silence. Peaceful silence. The kind earned through hardship. The kind impossible to appreciate without first enduring loss. Weeks later, the story of Hawthorne Manor spread throughout England. At first people discussed the scandal. Then the secret marriage. Then the dramatic public revelation. Yet over time those details faded. What remained was something rarer. A story of devotion. A story of endurance. A story proving that love, though delayed, had not been defeated. Lady Augusta withdrew from public life. Lady Beatrice discovered society far less forgiving when cruelty became visible. As for Eleanor, the woman once shunned by drawing rooms and whispered about in marketplaces, she became beloved throughout the county. Not because she married a duke. Because she had survived disgrace without surrendering her kindness. Years later, travelers occasionally passed the road where a young pregnant woman had once collapsed in the snow. Few remembered the details. Fewer still knew how close tragedy had come. But on certain winter afternoons, a carriage could sometimes be seen traveling that same route. Inside sat a duke, a duchess, and the son who had arrived with the dawn. Warmth replaced abandonment. Laughter replaced silence. Love replaced fear. And as the carriage rolled through the falling snow, leaving graceful tracks across the white countryside, it seemed almost impossible that such happiness had emerged from so much suffering. Yet perhaps that was the lesson winter had been teaching all along. The coldest seasons do not last forever. And sometimes the heart one believes lost is merely waiting beyond the storm to find its way home.